We are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Siman Kufnun, the Halachot of Bet Knesset, and we are up to Sif Gimal on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph of the regular prints of Mishna Berura. Maran writes, Mishik Bia Beto Yoter Mi Bet Knesset. We mentioned before that in a perfect society, the shul should be the tallest standing structure, physical structure in town. We learned this from the Psukim, but we mentioned all the details of nowadays, the complex life that we live within city life and high rises and so on and so forth. We discussed all of those, and the Ben Ish Chai, of course, writes that if there are goyish houses taller than the Bet Knesset, you could have also your house built already. If already it's defied by the goyim, you could also build your house taller. It's not the specific prohibition does not necessarily apply, but imagine in a perfect society where you have all single-story houses and so on, and you have the shul nice and beautiful, and Kumtarois, this guy still and built a house taller than the shul. Right? Do you have to now go to the homeowners association and destroy his house, or can he keep it once he happens? It says the Shulchan Aruch, Mishikbia beto yoter mi bet Knesset, yesh omrim shkofin oto lashpilo. There are those who say that we actually tell him, to take it down. Ve'im asa binyan gavoa yoter bekeren echad mi bet Knesset sagi bekach. And again, the Rama writes that if you have one corner of it, bekeren echad, only in one corner is taller than the Knesset. Retzono lomar, says the Mishnah Berura, shikpia rak zavit echad mikotle bet Knesset, davka kshikbiho al yedei binyan kego begag o aliyah, אבל לא כמו שעושים קצת שתוכבין עמוד ברזל. Says the Shulchan Aruch, even if you have one corner of the shul that goes up high, that's sufficient. It doesn't have to be the entire ceiling of the shul should be higher than all the batim. You could have like one corner going up, and that's really the source that you have for the towers on top of the shuls. Which again, of course, he was copied like everything else by Christianity and so on. But when you have over here as well, you see that they would have like a towering structure coming out of the shul with a menorah, with whatever it is that they had as making it known that this is a Jewish Bet Knesset. That is sufficient, says the Shulchan Aruch, and Mishnah Berura says that's only if you have some sort of building structure, but not that you take like a metal pole, and you stick it in the roof of the Bet Knesset and say, oh, this is now tall than the other buildings of the city. That's not considered being taller. It has to actually be some sort of structure, a building structure. So it says the Shulchan Aruch in Sif Dalet, haboneh kineged chalon Bet Knesset en maspik lo beharchakat 400 lefi shehu sarich or gadol. Now, we have, this is a Choshen Mishpat related Saif, because in Choshen Mishpat, when you want to build next to your neighbor, and imagine you had a single-story house, and now you want to build Kiyad Hashem Atova Alav, you want to build 3 stories, or 6 stories, right? So that's not so simple if you're allowed to do that halachically, because your neighbor could say, well, you're going to block your, 2 feet away from my building, and whereas I get a nice, beautiful light, sunlight, and sunset, and all that, now you're going to build this, and you're going to block all of the light, natural light of my house. That's a legitimate question. That's a legitimate taina, and has to be dealt with. But if you have arbamo, if you have 6 feet at least separation between them, then maybe that would be sufficient for light. Says the Shulchan Aruch, building on that, by shul, it's more. The Bet Knesset needs or gadol, needs a lot of light coming in. So therefore, if you live next door to the shul, and you are actually, 4 amod away, you are 6 feet away from the wall of the shul, and now you want to build, 3-story house, you want to go up all the way. You say, well, I'm 4 amot away. Says the Shulchan Aruch, not sufficient. If you're building next door to the shul, Chalon bet knesset en maspik bar chakad 4 amot. It's not sufficient with 4 amot. Lefi shu sarich or gadol. He needs a lot of light. Now, the Mishna writes, רצונו לומר, דאפילו בנה כותל ברשותו נגד חלונו של חברו, דין ההוא דצריך להרחיק 4 אמות, as we learn in Choshen Mishpat, that we mentioned, by regular residentials, 4 amot would be sufficient, 6 would be a sufficient distance to build up keneged, equivalent of the wall level of your friend's house. Not to make it dark, 4 amot is sufficient. In Bet Knesset you need a lot of light. So even 4 amot is not sufficient. So you need to distance yourself more, otherwise you're not allowed to build up to that level. But the Shulchan doesn't say how much, it just says more. So it says 4 amot is not sufficient. So how much is sufficient? Says the Shulchan Aruch, says the Mishna rather, he says if you have 8 amot, if you have 12 feet away, that for sure is sufficient already. Biuda brings the tshuvot of the Noda Biuda in Sha'aret Tshuva, vayem bepri megadim, shenistabek linyan lazara, ve'ezrat Hashim. Pri Megadim says, well, I'm not sure if this is only for the shul or is also for Ezrat Nashim, because we know the Kedusha of Ezrat Nashim is a lower level of the Kedusha than the regular space of the shul that they daven in on a normal basis. Im Gamsham, lo sagibar ba'amot, uldati nireh the havud lo sifaleh, says the Mishnah Berura, we don't have to create more isurim. It's a chidush by itself, and therefore it would be mutar by Ezrat Nashim. The b'lavachi gam ikar dina the mechaber baru. Even the Shulchan Aruch itself is considered a chidush. It's not so simple. If you take a look at Rav Kiva Eger, you see that's not it's not very straightforward necessarily. And the Ramah writes in his Tshuvot in Siman Lamed Bet that the courtyard that you have in the Bet Knesset, the courtyard itself, she'en bo tashmish Sanu al Rabim, that you don't have necessarily a private use of Rabim, and you don't have anything private done in the courtyard of shul normally, unless you do. But in a normal scenario, if someone's house is next to the courtyard of the Bet Knesset, they could open windows there, even though that now they could see inside the courtyard of the Bet Knesset. So what? It's not like a private thing. It's not like in regular laws of Choshen Mishpat, if you have a courtyard that's private and now your friend wants to open a window, a massive window in his what used to be a wall, which is facing your courtyard, and now it's going to see every little activity that you're going to be having in your courtyard, that's a very serious Choshen Mishpat question if he's allowed to do that or not. But Bet Knesset, who is not necessarily a private activity, it's a public domain, and there's nothing private that goes on there necessarily, says the Mishnah Berura, they can't stop the neighbor that wants to open a window over there overlooking the chatzir of the Bet Knesset, but if the kahal are opening chalonot of the Bet Knesset to the courtyard of this guy, the neighbor, then he could, even though that's Bet Knesset, he could go to the Bet Din and say, Hazaku Baruch Chachamim, you're the Bet Knesset, I understand, but Lamaisa, you can't do that. And he will be right in that case, because then they're not allowed to open a window, overlooking the courtyard, the private domain of this individual, if it was not warranted in the beginning, right? So therefore, it's not, he could stop them from doing that, and this is what the Ramah writes in the Tshuva in Siman. But again, this is, of course, when the Yachid is opening his windows to the public passage, right? It really depends on what's being done in that domain. It's not necessarily in every case is going to be true. So a question should be asked if a person is doing that in a halachic way. Now, the Kaf HaChaim brings that this is an important thing to be careful with, not to take away from the light of the Beit Knesset by building in front of the thing and making it a dark dungeon-like domain. The Kaf HaChaim brings that somebody didn't care about this, despite the community telling him, don't build a tall wall right next to the windows of the Beit Knesset. You're taking the entire light of the Beit Knesset. Especially imagine this back in the day when you didn't have this type of lights. The primary source of light in a Beit Knesset was the windows. Right? You had big, large windows, and a skylight, so to speak, inside the Beit Knesset, in order to provide an ample amount of light for the people who come in, during the day of Shabbat, in the afternoon of Shabbat, and Yamim Tovim, and they came for hearing the drasha, and so on. And lights is very important, the ambience, light. So this guy did not listen, and he did it. And the Kaf HaChaim says, Rahman Litzlan, his children all died. See, you have to, the kavod of Beit Knesset is something so important. And you have it the other way around as well. I think it's the Belzerov said, he asked the question, you need to be someone as big as him to say anything like this. He said he asked the question of why is it that all the Sephardi countries, that they were also some of them exposed to the horrors of the Nazis. Tunisia, they entered Tunisia, they invaded, but they didn't kill anyone. And the other ones, they didn't even get there necessarily. So he asks as well, why is it what zchut they had? And he writes that the special zchut that they had was the tremendous kavod that they gave to Batei Knesset. Still you see the Sfaradim are so careful not to cross their legs. Like as the Shulchan Aruch says, not to speak idle talk in the Beit Knesset, not to run in the Beit Knesset. Their Batei Knesset are usually covered with the most expensive rugs and the best lighting and so on and so forth. That's something very important that we have championed always. You see, that also brings tremendous level of blessings, not just that if you don't do it is negative, but in Kristallnacht in Europe, it was they ransacked everything, every shul, every Beit Knesset, every Beit Midrash. And in the middle of a neighborhood, there were many shuls that every single one of them was ransacked and broken. And there was one shul that nothing happened to it. Not one single glass was broken. It wasn't not at all, untouched. And when they looked into why it is, the essence of this shul was a breakaway shul. It was a breakaway shul, but in a good way. These were people who were frustrated with talking in shul, with disrespect of shul, and they got together and said, you know what, we're going to build a shul that is no talking, not a word of idle talk in duration of tefillah, and it was accepted. It was completely quiet and serious davening, and this was the only shul that was saved from the horrors of that night, of the Kristallnacht, and something important to keep in mind for the kavod of the Beit Knesset, and Be'ezrat Hashem will continue this in the days to come.